Thank you, Tommy. It's hard to be a Christian. It can be even harder to say it out loud, publicly, unapologetically, in a crowd of people, that you're a Christian. If you do this, you might find that people will want to talk to you about all kinds of things, often very deep things. If you say publicly, out loud, unapologetically that you're a follower of Jesus, you may very well be the first professed Christian that somebody else has come upon in quite a while. And they'll probably have some questions. You might have questions about science, about politics, about heaven and hell, and even Hinduism. When you say out loud, unapologetically, in public, that you're a Christian, you may very well find yourself thrust into the role of somehow being the embodiment of Christian faith for somebody else. And that means more is going to be expected of you. Well, more of some things are going to be expected of you. Less of other things are going to be expected of you. But things are going to be expected. There are going to be expectations on you as somebody who says they're a Christian that are not on somebody else who has not said that they're a Christian. You might be expected to rise above any and all temptations. You might be expected to know exactly what to say and exactly what to do at all times. You might be suddenly thought of as the expert on all things religious, the expert on the Bible, the expert on the afterlife, the expert on any other religion the world has to offer. And probably the most important thing is that you'll be seen as someone who can be trusted. You'll be seen as somebody with whom people just don't have to worry about certain things. That's what the Apostle Paul calls faithfulness. In another letter to another church, the Apostle Paul coined the terms fruit of the Spirit. It's a list of 9 attributes. The 7th one is faithfulness. Now, what Paul is talking about is our capacity to be counted upon. Trustworthiness. Are you worthy of trust? Do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you really believe the things that you say you believe? And do you act like you believe the things that you say that you believe? Especially when times get tough. Do you guard your own integrity? Do you guard the integrity of other people? This is what the Apostle Paul means when he says faithfulness, describing fruits of the Spirit. And this is what the Apostle Paul means in this letter that Tommy read so brilliantly, when Paul uses the word faith. Faith. This is what Paul means when he talks about faith to the church of Thessalonica. Just a little bit of background about this city of Thessalonica. In Paul's day, the city was a bustling city on a major commercial route. There was prosperity and there was a lot of religious activity. And what I mean by a lot of religious activity is there were a lot of cults that were built up around the Roman gods and goddesses. There were a lot of temples to gods and goddesses where people would align themselves with one or the other and worship there. But more relevant to this situation in Paul's day was the politics of the place. Now, this was in the region of Macedonia. About 145 years before Jesus was born, the area of Macedonia was taken into the Roman Empire. And when that happened, the city of Thessalonica became the capital city. That means it became the center of political activity and the center of political administration. Okay, about 100 years later, so this is about 45 years before Jesus was born, there was a very important major battle elsewhere in the Roman Empire. The city of Thessalonica had the good fortune of having supported the winning side. They supported the right team in this battle. And that means that they got a lot of perks from the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire thought very well of the city of Thessalonica, and they threw a lot of benefits their way. They got a lot of the highway projects, they got a lot of the building projects, and they got a lot of the prosperity that went along with all of those civic projects. Well, the city of Thessalonica was very grateful. And they expressed their gratitude to the Roman Empire by creating another cult to go along with all these other cults to Roman gods and goddesses. This cult centered around the government. And the city of Thessalonica declared that Caesar was a god worthy of worship. And they built a temple to Caesar where people could go and worship Caesar as they would any other god or goddess. So the government, the central Roman government, wasn't just obeyed and revered and honored, but it was worshipped in return for increased prosperity and status. Thessalonica was a community of status and prosperity. And you might even say Thessalonica was a city of suck-ups. They sucked up to the Roman government, and they got a lot of benefits from it. So this was a bustling center of status and politics and business, and I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. So you get a picture of Thessalonica. Well, it was into this bustling city who came the Apostle Paul. Now, the Apostle Paul came talking about a different way of life. He came to tell the citizens there about Jesus, and that Jesus was sent by God, the capital G God, the creator of the whole universe. And this man who was sent by God gave us a message that the real power in the universe came from love. And that every person was valued and loved by their creator God. And every person was worthy of love, regardless of their status, regardless of whether they could do you a favor, regardless of whether they had anything they could scratch your back with. Those with no money, they were just as valued by God. This is what Paul is teaching and Paul is preaching. He talks about another way of life. He talks about a way of life that is not beholden to the fickle winds of human politics. A way that doesn't value people because of what they have, or who they know, or what they can do for you. Paul told the Thessalonians that there was a way of life that did not demand deference, that didn't recognize entitlement, a way of life in which happiness and satisfaction did not come by means of greasy personal favors. Instead, this way that Paul preached, the Christian way, the way of Jesus, each person was valued as a beloved child of God, regardless of their social standing, regardless of their politics, regardless of their political acuity. Jesus taught that the Spirit of God dwells within each person and can transform each person. The people of Thessalonica listened to Paul. And some people even wanted to live that way, to live that different way, to follow the Jesus way. It sounded good to them. But that meant that they were going to have to give up that other way. Because you can't worship the capital G God, creator of the universe, if you're worshiping Caesar as a god. They had to give up their high regard of status and privilege, which meant they had to give up their own status and their privilege. Following the Jesus way meant going against everything that the world around them held to be true and important. So following the Jesus way meant incurring a lot of ill will and ill regard and wrath, and even worse, from your whole community. But they did it. Some of them did it. And some of them stuck with it, in spite of everything. Just as Paul described about your steadfastness and faith during all your persecutions and the afflictions that you are enduring. Why would anybody do this? Why would anybody endure persecutions and afflictions? Why would anybody put themselves through that? Why would anybody sacrifice everything? Why would anybody set themselves apart or set themselves up for ridicule or persecution or danger? Why would they give up everything? There are some biblical scholars that still scratch their heads over these Thessalonians. Why would they do that? I think it has to do with the power of the gospel. Just the inherent power of the gospel of God's love. Elsewhere in Paul's writings, he talks about the Thessalonians and the Christian community there. And he says that they received the word, the preaching, the good news, not just in word, but also in power. He means something very powerful, palpable, tangible happened to these people when they accepted the Jesus way and started living the way of Jesus. Something real happened that transformed them, that turned their lives in a different direction. And the real experience of the Spirit and the real experience of love, well, it kept them faithful to Christ. And it made them rock solid faithful to each other. It gave them that capacity for faithfulness. It made them trustworthy. The spiritual writer, Parker Palmer, he's one of my favorites. He says our soul is our spiritual DNA. Our soul is that thing that makes us uniquely us. We're born with it, and it sticks with us all of our lives. And if you have known anybody from the time they were a baby until the time they were grown up, you know what I mean, and what Parker Palmer means is that some people just are the way they are throughout their lives. They have that essence, even as they grow, even as they mature, even as they get life experience. You might think about all the baby Jesuses that we have had in our White Gifts Christmas pageant. Every year, I personally look forward to who is going to be the baby Jesus and what are they going to be like. Are they going to be solemn, with their big eyes just taking everything in? Or are they going to be wiggly? Or are they going to be happy and joyful? baby Jesus we've had has been different, and we've been absolutely delighted with what we've seen. God just makes us in a certain way, and he gives us a soul, and we keep it all our lives. At the same time as we grow, we also get shaped by our families and our school and our work and our friends and our community, various pressures of life. And sometimes with all that, our soul goes into hiding. It doesn't leave us, but it goes into hiding. It goes into hiding when we know we're right and we're told that we're wrong. It goes into hiding when we have revealed to somebody a very secret and sacred part of our heart, and we're judged for that. It goes into hiding when we've tried to work through a particular conundrum in our lives and suddenly we're buried under a dump truck load of bad advice. Or when we try and do what's best for us and somebody tries to talk us out of it. Or we get scolded, or we get rejected, or we get redirected. All these kinds of things send our soul into hiding. And it's just waiting to come out. It's just waiting there. It's just waiting for somebody to trust so it can come out. It's just waiting for somebody to come along with whom we can be who God made us to be, who we can be ourselves, who listen to us without judging and won't try to force us to be somebody we're really not, who can just let us be the person that God created. And maybe that's why non-church people are so eager to talk to somebody who says they're a Christian. They're just eager to bare their souls to the first professed Christian who's going to cross their paths. We are all hungry for somebody to trust so we can just be ourselves. And when we have these people in our lives, we get the blessing of being ourselves. And how precious are those people who are worthy of our trust, who we can trust. So it's little wonder that Paul is so deeply thankful for those people in Thessalonica, who in the face of everything that would steer them in a different direction, they have the fortitude and faith to stick with the Jesus way and grow in their faithfulness to God and grow in their sense of community with each other. And little wonder that Paul would share their story with other churches and praise these Christians in Thessalonica, not for their status, not for their accomplishments, not for their wealth, but to praise them because they're growing in love and growing in faith and growing in their faithfulness to each other. Today is a really good day for each one of us to consider our growth in love and faith. Because we have just done something really important. We have just commissioned 3 of our young people. Tommy, Riley, and Elliot, we have seen them grow up before our eyes in this congregation. And when they were smaller, when they were just little squirts, we all delighted in how smart they were, and how sweet they were, and how they really wanted to talk to us in coffee hour and tell us about their teachers, whether they liked their teacher or not, and tell us about their pets, and tell us about their vacations, and tell us about all kinds of things. And we delighted in them. Now, we can be sure that as they have been growing up under our eyes, at this same time, they have been encountering somewhere in their existence the forces that would send their little souls into hiding. Somewhere along the way, by the time they've reached this age, they've encountered something that would send their little soul into hiding, just as you and I have. You and I all know the forces that these three youth are facing. And so, church, we have a really important job these next few months, whether or not we are formal mentors to Ryder and to Elliot and to Tommy. We need to do what we can do to make sure that their souls know that we in church are trustworthy, that we're faithful. So we need to listen to them. We need to hear them. We need to get to know them so we can help them discover who God made them to be. So they can grow in their faith and they can grow in their love. And being faithful to these treasures, these three treasures, who at this moment are now in the basement, getting their confirmation room all together and deciding how to make their space their own special space. Being faithful to them may be the most joyful occasion that we have this year ourselves to grow in our own faith. Amen? Amen. Amen.